Hey, everybody, it's Natalie B. McKenzie with The Whole Woman, and welcome to this week's episode of Living Life Authentically with yours truly. So, today is Juneteenth. So, before we get started, I'm going to do a quick history lesson. Not that you need it, but just in case, because I am really just learning to appreciate Juneteenth and what it's all about. So, it's June 19th. That's right, 2023. And Juneteenth is a federal holiday here in the United States. Now, to our viewers all around the world, some of this may come as a shock to you, but that's okay. No need to clutch your pearls. We're okay with the facts as I'm about to present them to you. So, this is the commemoration of the emancipation of enslaved African Americans in these United States. It's been celebrated by African Americans since the 1800s, but was really only made a national holiday 4 or 5 years ago. Anyway, Texas was the last state in the Confederacy in which enslaved people were officially freed. And this did not take place until 1865. So imagine me, the little girl from the island of Jamaica, debating with my husband when emancipation took place. I kept saying 1834. He insisted 1865 until we realized that we were both correct, but with two different realities. On that note, this week, ladies and gentlemen, we have invited someone who has quite a bit of history to share with us on Juneteenth about some of the museums and African American history here in America. She's a native of Sanford, Florida. Yes, I said Sanford, and a third generation resident of Seminole County. She graduated from the University of South Florida with a bachelor's art in international relations, and she has completed executive courses at Yale University. She is the director and CEO of the Goldsboro West Side Community Historical Association, collaborating with states and federal agencies, partnering with small businesses, executing grants and fundraising platforms while managing 6 entities within the association. They are the Goldsboro Museum, the Francis Oliver Cultural Arts, and Goldsboro Welcome Center. She also is involved with the Chrome's Academy Museum, the Goldsboro Heritage and Art Garden, and the Goldsboro Arts Square, and the Page Jackson Cemetery in the Southeast. Did I get it all in there? Without further ado, so I don't mess it up, I'll let her tell her story. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome today's guest, Miss Pasha Baker.
Good afternoon and happy Juneteenth, everyone. Happy Juneteenth, Natalie.
Thank you, Sarah. Such a pleasure to have you. Welcome, welcome. How have you been?
Thank you. We're joining you from the Sunshine State, so sending some sunshine and some love to New Jersey.
Thank you. We appreciate it because you may know the last couple of weeks it's been a little smoggy, but I think we're getting through.
Oh, yeah. You got the wildfires coming in from Canada.
That's right, and we hope it's over. Anyway, I am excited to have you, Pasha, because when I think of all these museums and I think of African American history, as I said before, as an immigrant, I'm really delving in and starting to learn.
We're all immigrants.
Hello.
We're all immigrants. You ain't the only one.
Let's get it straight. Every one of us. So this new immigrant who is really just learning to embrace and appreciate the history here in America and all of the history, I am truly fascinated with what you do. But more importantly, your bio states that you are a third generation resident in Sanford, Florida. And when I think of Sanford, God knows, I think of Trayvon Martin and that we must have just landed there. But for 3 generations of a Black family, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and growing up in Seminole County.
No problem. I had a wonderful childhood, shaped me who I am today. Definitely remember the stories of my grandmother. She was about 1 or 2 generations out of enslavement. So she remembered directly things that were happening and the stories that she were told of being on the plantation and working in the field. all of those type of things. And remember getting those memories and that history with her, because I was the one that stayed after school. As soon as the stories went off, and everybody on this platform know what stories are. They're after your daytime television, your shows that you watch. General Hospital, All My Children. Shout out to
Oh,
Erica Kane. Loved her at 4 years old. I loved her. So all of those things, and shelling the beans, picking the green beans apart, getting ready for supper, and her making me sandwiches after school when I would come in. I would stay with my grandmother till my mother got home from work. And so my grandparents are what you call from the Overground Railroad.
Now,
And the
what is that?
Overground Railroad is where we came from the South and where we were migrating, because my grandparents heard of these places called Goldsboro and Edenville. And as they were referred to in Zora Neale Hurston's books as where those Negroes don't have no boss, they boss themselves. You see, Goldsboro and Edenville, the places where I'm from, and 3 generations of, there are 2 African American cities, not communities, but a city. So Goldsboro and Edenville are brother cities. Edenville is your first Black incorporated city in the United States. Goldsboro is your second. They're about 19 miles apart here in the state of Florida. And you see, the remarkable story of that, and knowing our history, is that the first Black enslaved man was brought here by the Spanish in 1526. That predates the 1619 project, is what most people know of where the Africans came off the ships. Before was our last stop here in the Americas. Remember where those ships came off from the coast of Africa?
Yeah.
They went down. The first stop was the Caribbean. The second stop was South America.
That's right.
The last stop were the Americas, was here in the United States, North America. That is the last stop. So before that last stop, remember how it's not Columbus Day anymore. It is now Native American Day or Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yes.
Where you had to learn Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Remember, the Spaniards were one of the first to come over and see the Americas and to talk to the Indians that were already natives here. And he came in 1492. 1526 is when the other group of Spaniards came in, and they came in from Ponce de Leon, and now it's Leon County, which is our capital city here in Florida. Remember, Florida is named from the Spanish word swamp, because it's just a swamp. I don't have those beautiful basements that you all have up north, because if you dig too deep here, you're going to hit water.
Yep.
So the first Spaniards, they brought over in 1526, they brought over a Black enslaved man to the state of Florida. And when we celebrate Juneteenth, remember our dates. The last state east of the Mississippi River to let go of the enslaved was Florida, east of the Mississippi. Only 1 month better than Texas. But we had slaves in the state of Florida since 1526. That's a long time. The last state west of the Mississippi River to let go of its enslaved people was the state of Texas. They're in Galveston. They were the last to know about who freed the slaves. President Lincoln, with the Emancipation Proclamation that was written to absolve enslavement shortly 11 days after the Civil War in 1863. It took 2.5 years for all of the Confederate states to let go of the enslaved. Each one of us has a different emancipation date. And I want to make that clear. Georgia has a different emancipation date than Florida. So does Virginia and all the rest of the states that did it before. Some did it before, that were in the Union before the Civil War. Some did it after. Remember, we were $1 billion business. We were the labor for cotton,
Enterprise.
tobacco,
Sugar
and
cane,
agriculture.
rice, everything.
That's right. Your rice fields in the North Carolinas were your Geechee people. They held on to that history. We had an exhibition here where they held on to the culture, and as well as the languages and the art forms, everything that we had. And they were the last, the Gutchagila people in the Carolinas, North and South Carolina, which still remain very much today, that work the rice fields. Yes,
So,
ma'am.
Pasha, I'm very curious because you had the luxury of sitting at your grandmother's feet and hearing these stories. Did she document these? Did she put these in writing? And is this part of what you're collecting and showcasing in the museums, in the Goldsboro museums and the neighboring museums?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So we have all that history collected, not just from my grandmother, but from others as well. And from my aunt who founded the museums. You see, my aunt founded the museum. She went down to our local museum, the Sanford Museum, some time ago, and she said, "Where is our history in this museum? All you have in this museum is pictures of a few black men that can run fast and can catch a ball." She said, "Where's our history? Where's the history of Goldsboro? Two black men that not only lived off the land, but incorporated cities. To incorporate a city, that means you have all your forms of government. That means you collected tax dollars. That means the same way you run a city today there in New Jersey is the same way you ran it back here in 1877, shortly after enslavement.
What is
Before
your
we
aunt's
built
name, Pasha? Because that's important for us to note.
the Francis Coleman Oliver Arts. Of course, and that's the building that we're in. Is Francis Coleman Oliver.
Fabulous.
Yes,
And now
yes. And she's
you're
still here. She wakes me up every morning at about 6 o'clock. The lady don't sleep. She still get up. I don't know why she waking me up so early for. I don't know.
how old is she today? We won't tell her we
She
told.
turns 80 this September,
Okay.
and she still runs the show.
I love it. Talk
Yeah,
to
that's why I'm not the executive director. She is still the executive director and co-founder. So she still signs off on everything. As I told you before, we're building a brand new building across the street, 2,500 square foot. She wanted to take out a few of the walls so that we have more spaces to exhibit some of the artwork and put them on easels and what have you. Make sure that people can really feel what she collected. So she collected the history of Goldsboro for almost 40 plus years. So
let's
not
talk
only are
about
they written
Goldsboro.
down, we have them in YouTube. You can visit our YouTube videos. We've done it for other Black owned museums as well. And that's the way most Black owned museums are founded. They have a director that my aunt, she poured into 40 plus years of saving and collecting the history. And then she started these museums with her retirement check.
Wow.
So they are still a reason why I have to work on all those platforms. They're still not funded by the city of Sanford nor Seminole County. Our funds still go to those white museums that do not have our history.
Wait a minute. So,
Yeah.
you know what? It's
Oh,
Juneteenth,
you
and
don't
we're
got enough time now. You told me 30 minutes now. I told y'all.
we,
Told y'all.
we're going to do this again because we want to delve into this. Let's talk about the Goldsboro Museum. I believe that's
Yeah,
the first one your aunt founded.
that's
It was
right.
funded
All of
by
these were funded. Yeah. So when I came on, so I bought a few more buildings and properties as well to add on to the collection to make sure that we preserve the history. And we're in Florida, where a lot of your northerners, now we call it the Great Migration again.
Mhm.
So the first Great Migration is where we had, after during those in those agricultural fields, We have from Sanford to Rochester, New York, where
Mhm.
they would go up and pick the apples. You have this is called the Big Apple for a reason. You have your apple and orchard groves as far as your eyes can see. We were the labor. So as soon as the citrus, the celery seasons ended here, they would load up on the back of the truck
Mm.
and they would make their way from Sanford. It would be a couple of day trip, and they would be on the back of the truck. You wouldn't stay in hotel rooms. You would sleep on the back of that truck. Every few hours, or actually, you would hold it. They would take you out into the woods. You would relieve yourselves. You would eat whatever that was on the truck and whatever you could bring with you, and you would go up north. We call it going up yonder. Um, and that was about 40 plus thousand people from the Jim Crow around after enslavement, that Jim Crow era,
Mhm.
that they would load up on the back of those trucks from Central Florida. That 40,000 plus is just from Central Florida. We have that documented. They load up on those trucks and head north to where you all are. And that is how we got up north. And we noticed not that racism had stopped, or not that Jim Crow was any better up there. We
Mm.
noticed that there was a little bit more freedom and opportunity. So once they found that out, they started making their way. They didn't come back up here. They
Um,
didn't come down south again. They made their way and they made their homes up there in the north. And that's how so many migrant workers set out and have roots in the south. Our roots aren't normally in the north. Very few people can say they came from a freed person that migrated from another country or what have you, that started up north. Blacks, if you are African American, black, whatever colored, Negro, whatever you want to call it, your roots started here in the South, where you were used as the labor.
very interesting.
All right. And then you moved up north, and how you got up north is on those back of those trucks.
So I am just mesmerized by this, because to have someone who's my counterpart tell the story, because your family has maintained the living history, and that is so critical. That is so critical, because we've not told that story. It is not documented in a way that we want to pass it on to the next generation. It's not being taught in our history classes.
Yeah, definitely. So we have our governor here that said Black history cannot be taught in our schools. So what schools now bring me into is to teach that history and to teach local history. Because a lot of times people don't know the history a mile down from the street from where they live at or where they grew up. This is just right here. Now we're talking about Miss Parks or Dr. King or some of the others that broke all these barriers. But we're talking about people that your grandmother and grandfather knew. And why your pioneers are named Cherry Street and historical Goldsboro Boulevard, and how you related to them. And so oftentimes when I go into schools, people say, hey, that's my cousin, or that's my aunt, and he played on the Negro release. Yeah, and that's a good feeling, because normally in museums you don't relate.
You can't relate. And
That's
the reality, which gives me chills, the reality that slavery, which they so often want us to think is just this distant thing that we have no, we can't really relate to. Slavery is 3 generations back. Like you said, your grandmother told you living stories. There are people
right.
who have living family members. My husband's mom, who just passed away, God rest her soul, told us stories. My husband speaks of picking cotton down south
Mm-hmm.
during the summer months and going to school year round, because when he went south on summer vacation, they would be in school, because they are in school during the summer, because during the fall they're picking cotton, or whichever
Right.
way it is,
That's
he would tell that story. And my husband's 79 years old, 78.
right.
So it's a real living thing, it's not that distant. And the fact that you're going into schools, wait a minute, you're in Florida. Are you legally allowed to do that anymore?
Of course. I don't work for the schools. You can't take my pension. I'm good. That's right. So we go into the schools and we educate them. And a lot of that stuff is kind of just show from the governor because you really can't outlaw Black history. I mean, come on. Like, what are you going to do? You going to sue us?
It's history. It's
You,
going nowhere.
you gonna take you when you talk about banning this or doing this, these aren't laws that are really can be enforced.
Let's talk about the cemetery in the Southeast, the Page Jackson Cemetery.
Yeah,
How-
yeah. So I bought that under Governor Scott, who is now our Senator Scott. And much too like Governor DeSantis, same type of um, mentality and the things he say in lines with um, the um, MAGA Republican Party.
Mm.
So a lot of that. So Page Jackson Cemetery, I bought from the state of Florida. I'm one of the only ones, if not still the only one, that owns a cemetery who purchased land from the state of Florida. And I had to go in and purchase it. And that cemetery predates. So if we did archaeological testing, probably into the 1700s, where we lived with the Indians, and the Indians would feel sorry for us for being enslaved. And so they would bury us on the Page Jackson Cemetery. Now it's known Page Jackson Cemetery, for to give us honor or what have you after death. And so that's where a lot of enslaved are buried. Our Civil War veterans are buried. Remember when the military first started, blacks could not, blacks weren't allowed to have guns. Blacks were only the cooks and the janitors in the military. They didn't believe a black man was smart enough to out strategize the opposition. Those type of things. So when the Civil War came up and blacks were fighting for our freedom, remember it was the colored troops that relayed that message from President Abraham Lincoln for the Emancipation Proclamation that freed the enslaved in Galveston, Texas on Juneteenth, that June 19th, 1865.
So tell me
That
some of
freed all the slaves, that all the cities. It was the colored troops and the Buffalo Soldiers that did that.
did that.
That went along. It wasn't the white, it was a white leader, General McCook, that was the general. And since then, the only 4 and 5 star generals that we had, of course, for the commander in chief will always be the first 5 star general was President Obama. And then the next was General Colin Powell.
Mm-hmm. The wow, what challenges me, because you said something that I'm still mulling over in my mind. You purchased the cemetery. It
Yeah,
is
I was fear of it being developed. So there was a 60 Minutes piece maybe a few months ago where in the 80s they put a school in Tampa on the black cemetery. Yeah, in the 80s. In the 80s. Yeah, wasn't that long ago. In the 80s. In the 80s. Wasn't that long ago. They knew it was there and they still chose to develop on it.
How are you able to raise the funds to do the work that you do? Because, my mind works in that, okay, everything costs money. And
that's right. It's not free.
To get.
We have it open today. And that's from what you just read about my bio. I work with a lot of federal agencies, state agencies, corporate donors, people that have moved away from Goldsboro, who grew up here, who were wildly successful, send back checks, people that are not so wildly successful that give $5, to keep the lights on. So it's a very much a humbling and a blessing experience. Yes.
So you have 6 institutions, 6 museums or locations that you're managing, that you all own, that you operate. Mm-hmm. How do we get information on all of these? Where do we find more information? How do we
have it
part of our vacation stop?
And I work with quite a few museums up there as well, where you are, your Rochester Museum. Like I said, as part of the Great Migration, we've exchanged a lot of information. I worked with your Jackie Robinson Museum that just opened up about a year ago. And so he has ties here as well. When he first came, Mr. Robinson came to integrate baseball. He was ran off the field by the Ku Klux Klan. And we have that picture documented across the street in the Goldsboro Museum. So we lent that picture to them as well. So you can see all of our series and the museums here on social media, all of the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can see all the documentaries. You can see the oral histories, everything that you can think of. Our website, where we actually have the exhibits, collections, and artwork already digitized for you. So you can spend days and days and days going through it all. So it's all been digitized and all been technologically advanced for you just to go and research. And we have research students that come from Iowa, University of Alabama, every school you can think of that's in our country, and some without the country, some outside the country, that come and just do research.
Pasha, do you travel outside of Florida to speak on African American history? Because I heard you say you work at different museums,
so
but
I'll be
going
in
into schools.
Nashville the end of July, and that'd be to speak at the African American Association of African American Museums, and that'd be to speak on our different emancipation days, because that's one thing that people don't realize. Juneteenth is really a Texas holiday. It's just the state of Texas. Each of us have our own emancipation days, and it's important to know that history of when those people were freed, because could you imagine the celebrations we had after being enslaved in the state of Florida from 1526 to May 20th, 1865. Could you imagine? Oh, we partied. You better believe we partied. We got down with it, baby. Oh, we had us a good time. You talk about folks have a good time now. Oh, we had a good time. May 20th, 1865. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
What is the national move, or is there a national move to, because I know it took a lot to make Juneteenth a national holiday, that I know, but it's interesting that we never talk about the fact that each state has a different holiday.
Most people don't know that. They just, Juneteenth is something, as a historian, being in this business for now almost 10 plus years, as well as knowing our history. Juneteenth is something that I've always known since growing up. And as well as the states had different emancipation days as well. There are different movements going on, and I'm part of that, to start speaking of when was this state emancipated, and knowing that Juneteenth was the emancipation of Texas, but not of all the enslaved. There were still 250,000 that were enslaved that was freed by the 13th Amendment that outlawed slavery in the United States. And that came much after Juneteenth.
Now, where were these slaves?
They were all in the West. They were on the West Coast, the Midwest, all of those states as well. There were still more states that did not have, that did not free its enslaved after the Civil War.
Okay, so because we're pressed by time, and I really hate that.
I told you that.
This subject matter needs a lot more time. What's your social media handle? I know we can go to your website, but where can we find you on Instagram? Because that's where the kids are.
Goldsboro Museum.
Love it.
We keep it easy. Twitter, Goldsboro Museum. Instagram, Goldsboro Museum. Facebook, Goldsboro Museum. It all populates. YouTube, Goldsboro Museum. And visit our documentaries. We're glad to share the history with you. It was a pleasure today. And Natalie, we met on a women's panel. So, and we are sorority sisters. So, very proud of you. This is an awesome platform. You all do a great job. Definitely, definitely. If you let me know, I'll be happy to showcase some more history in our building.
Absolutely. It's a delight to have you. And I get excited because I love learning. And when I find that I am so
Hopefully you
ignorant,
learned something new today.
oh, God, yes. And
Good.
I'll keep learning. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking with none other than Pasha Baker. She's the director and CEO of the Goldsboro West Side Community Historical Association, and they manage, monitor, and own and operate several other historical centers. Most importantly, I am fascinated with the Page Jackson Cemetery in the Southeast. You can find them at goldsboromuseum.com. You can find them at Goldsboro Museum on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So much to learn. And this woman, this is a passion of love from her family. Please tell me your aunt's name again, because we want
Frances Coleman Oliver. She wrote it up here.
There
If you
you
can
go.
see, there it is.
I love it. Well, please tell Auntie Frances Coleman Oliver that we are so grateful for her. Thanks to your grandmother for pouring the stories into you so you can continue to memorialize them and continue
We
going
got to
into
keep the legacy going.
keep the
And we
legacy
keep it on
going.
platforms like this as well, so everybody knows.
That's right. So we're getting the word out. You're watching Living Life Authentically, and I'm Natalie B. McKenzie. Our guest today is Pasha Baker, and we are both wishing you happy Juneteenth. Learn your African American history and teach somebody. I wish you enough life to live, enough joy to give, enough love to share. I wish you enough. Good night.